Every now and again, you start playing a game and you can tell it's going to be fun even within the opening hours. It's when you're 70 plus hours in and having just as much fun as you were at the start that you know you have something truly special on your hands. What is happening, y'all? Cowboy here, and this is my review of Dragon Dogma 2. So, as I said, I am over 70 hours played at this point. This is the start of New Game ++, so very early, very minor spoilers. But let's talk about this game because, man, I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I have not had as much fun with an action RPG as I have with this since probably Elden Ring. The combat in this game is absolutely top-notch. It's probably my new all-time favorite combat in an RPG. The world is great to explore. The vocational differences are awesome. And I'm just having a blast with this. So let's dive on in, talk about the game, my thoughts on it and everything, and, you know, kind of what makes it as good as it is. And to start, I want to talk about the combat. Now, combat in this game is dependent on the vocation you pick, which is this game's version of classes, and each plays incredibly different. So each class has a class action. So this one I have Redotted Bolt, which I can shoot out this little bolt to stagger enemies. I can also charge it on up and toss out a heavier bolt, which will put enemies into a stasis. I have a number of basic attacks, but if I end up tapping the button, I go into a spin to win, which I can do that much longer too. And just hold it down and jump on top of something and just absolutely shred its wings. And then on top of that, each class gets access to 4 abilities. So right now I have a dashing thrust on with the twin spear here. And this just has great exploration potential, like, you know, cliffs that you wouldn't be able to reach, or if I wanted to cross this water, I could just whoop and yeet my way across. I'm playing right now as Mystic Wayfarer, which allows me to switch weapons. But so if I were to switch over to a heavy weapon like this, very different gameplay. I have very heavy swings. I can actually time these to swing a little bit faster. Or I can charge them on up, which I'll get poised during. We even have timed releases, so you can notice how I have kind of like a gold aura as I release that. If I basically overcharge it, I don't get that aura. I have shoulder checks when I hit the left bumper on it. That's kind of the class action with this. And then, you know, some abilities with that. But, you know, Warrior's all about timed attacks, getting poised, hitting heavier stuff. If I switch over to Magic Archer, I have 2 different types of shot with my bow. I have Rivet Shot, which will rapidly lock on and shoot out multiple arrows. And then I have Pinpoint Volley, which is going to be great because it'll lock on to multiple enemies. So I have one that's more for AoE, I have one that's for multiple enemies, and then I have a variety of abilities with that. But so each vocation here plays incredibly different, and you end up with a gameplay loop that ends up being just incredibly satisfying, because every time you want to switch vocation up, you go to something else and all of a sudden your combat style is completely changed from what it previously was. And that's something that I found incredibly enjoyable. I started off as fighter, and fighter felt pretty vanilla. I was kind of like, you know, I don't know about this. Got enough levels to get a perk that I wanted out of it, and then ended up switching over. Did Mystic Spearhand, absolutely loved it. Switched to Warrior, absolutely loved it. Switched to Warfare, absolutely loved it. Trickster I didn't vibe with all that much, but it's just that freedom to be able to switch between vocations that made this game so incredibly appealing. And this is a big thing coming from the first Dragon's Dogma, because in the first game, your stats were largely based on what you were playing as, whereas in here, your stats just kind of move around. So if I decide to play as a warrior, my leveled up stats are going to allocate more towards strength. If I switch to sorcerer, those stats are suddenly going to shift into magic. So a way to think of it would be like, if you were playing Elden Ring and you took off your two-handed greatsword and decided to put on a stave, all of a sudden your strength turned into int. It would be like that. And so it allows you to just freely swap between classes and just have an absolute blast. Just a super fun experience. Even though I'm playing as Warfare right now, because I really like that flexibility, when I was playing as individual classes, I had just some insane potential, like playing as Magic Archer, for example, because that's what I have on right now. I have my one arrow, the avalanche, which, well, there should be a Cyclops coming up that I can use that on and show you what it looks like. I had a ricochet shot that I could fire into caves and it would bounce arrows off of walls and kill everything in sight. I had a directable arrow that I could direct where it's going to go in the air and use that as kind of an ambush tactic. I had an arrow that I could shoot at pawns if they went down to resurrect them. I had the ultimate skill, which was just an absolute shredding boss killer where I sacrificed my own health to do a ton of damage. And that's all just in one class. But if I want to do warfare, hey, I still have access to that bow. I can have 1 or 2 abilities on and then be able to swap to other weapons. And the combat just ends up being incredibly satisfying because of all this freedom you have. And on top of that, there's a lot of inter-world activity with the combat. So after you stagger enemies, you can, run up, grab the enemy, pin it down while someone else comes over and stab it. You can run up, grab them, pick them up, chuck them off a cliff, chuck them in the water, chuck them into each other. If you see the boulders and stuff, you can push the boulders down and crush enemies. You can throw fire barrels or poison barrels or things you see in the environment. And, the game really promotes creativity, especially with something like the Trickster class, with are these guys dead already? Yeah, they are. With the Trickster class, I can basically create illusion platforms and then put a little spirit over them, swing my thing around, which will aggro enemies, and then enemies are going to run towards that spirit and run off a cliff. You just have this insane level of freedom. So right now you're kind of seeing how that works. If they're going to probably kill it before I can switch. Yeah. I'm going to go over to Rivet Shot so you can see how that looks, where it's like a rapid lock-on. But you end up just having a level of freedom that is relatively unmatched on an RPG like this. I would expect freedom like that in something like Baldur's Gate. So you can see that's like a rapid lock-on. If I go to the other one, it's going to be much slower lock-on, but this one I can, everything's dying instantly because early game. Anyway, point is, there's just the freedom you have here is basically unmatched. So there we go. Here's a good example. And then my arrows are going to go and hit the harpies, which in terms of scaling, enemy scaling is largely based on the zone you're at. So even though this is New Game Plus Plus, a basic goblin and a basic harpy is still a basic goblin and a basic harpy. Don't expect your early game enemies to be harder in New Game Plus. The late game enemies, yes, they're going to be just as hard, if not harder. But early game is early game. It's just how it is. Moving on from the combat, though, to talk a little bit about kind of the world design and exploration. I really love the world here. There's a lot of exploration to do, just running around the world and finding chests. And as your pawns explore the game, they'll also gain experience. So you could be running somewhere and your pawn will be like, Master, I know about a chest here, and you can tell them to go, and your pawn will guide you on over to that chest or guide you to a quest location. We don't have like Breath of the Wild style climbing, but we do have clambering. So anything that you can get your hands on, you can get up. And so there's quite a lot of freedom and exploration running around the world. There were times where I'd come across gates that were locked and basically found somewhere to hardcore parkour my way to behind the gate to shoot the latch to get it open to go where I wanted to go. Caves and stuff and tombs that'll pop up on the map that you can go into. Some of them are short and sweet. Some of them are more in-depth and they might have a boss at the end of them. I did one early on that was I went in, was going all over the place, ended up fighting a chimera, found a cursed treasure. The cursed treasure summoned up a lich. Just wild encounters. And then on top of that, there's also random culling requests that'll pop up. So as you're exploring the road and going, it'll be somebody under attack by some enemies. You kill those enemies, they're going to thank you, probably give you a couple heals and some gold. So world feels very alive, lots of interactive elements as you're going about and exploring, lots to do. And especially with the environmental manipulation, crashing enemies into boulders and having the boulders roll down on top of them. Here's a good example. This is obviously very early at the start, but so there's a Cyclops that's going to pop up out of the rocks. He's taking a nap. And I can run on over here. And obviously I know this is all here already, but take this and then oh God, did I drop it? No, pick it up. No, oh shit. Well, rip. I might be able to get this with my hammer. Let me try. Yep. So bust that on open. All of that water is coming rushing through. That's going to clear the path, deal damage to the Cyclops. Dude, that like the only other games that I get vibes like this are like Baldur's Gate 3. And, you know, that is a CRPG. It's not, this isn't the type of interaction I would expect in like a third person open world action RPG. And it makes it just incredibly delightful. Like I have so much fun just exploring the world. And like I said, this is New Game Plus Plus. I know of some quests I haven't done from talking to other people that I've been reviewing. On my New Game Plus playthrough, there was new stuff that I was uncovering as I played throughout the world. To talk about health in world exploration. So the green bar you see at the bottom of the screen is my health, and I have healable health and non-healable health. And what I mean by this is if I jump far enough that I take damage, you can see how I have like gray and then like a black portion of the health bar. That black portion of the health bar, that is now just gone until I rest. And what I mean by resting is either using a campsite or going to an inn at town and resting up. The rest of the health though, that is healable. So whether I'm using healing or I use a mage to top me on off, I can get that health back, but you can see there's a little chunk that's missing and that will come back when I rest. So there's almost a fatigue type system in the game where, you know, you're seeing how far you can go before you need to rest. There's also hidden rift stones in the game like this one that you can find. These are usually unique. So if I pop into this one, Riftstone of Robustness. This is going to find pawns with a brawny build. And obviously you have the general riftstones in town, but these are all over the world. So if you want to, like if I wanted to replace this rogue or this thief with somebody else, I could hop in there and find something else to swap him out with. The one downside I'll say is while the exploration is incredibly rewarding and the game does give you unrivaled freedom, you can overexplore and end up triggering stuff that you shouldn't. And I guess a good example of this, just looking at the map, obviously this is probably one of the only spoilery things I have in this review. But over here at Melv, there is an event that happens early on at Melv involving like a drake. And I decided to shoot all the way over towards one of the final zones in the game to get some mats that I had missed on my playthrough that I wanted. And ended up fighting drakes over there, which then caused the drake in Melv to not spawn. But because the drake in Melv didn't spawn, I couldn't continue a certain person's questline in Melv because it involved that drake. So there are pros and cons to it because we have literally unrivaled freedom. Like there's a border, and as you play through the first act, you'll get a quest line where eventually you'll get a border permit and you can cross the border. But there's also caverns I could go through to sneak through the border, or I could climb onto a cart and smuggle myself through the border. And so there is all of this freedom that you have available. And I don't want to say too much freedom because, you know, I like the freedom. The freedom's great, but it can end up punishing you if you end up, over exploring at times. So you need to always be cautious about the world. On top of that, death is very serious. You know, I had a quest line where a guy was mouthing off, so I threw him off a cliff. Because I threw him off the cliff, I couldn't continue the quest line, and I had to go to the tomb where his body was and use a wake stone to bring him back to then be able to trigger the dialogue I needed to do the quest line. So it's, you know, the game gives you a lot of freedom, but you know, that freedom can be punishing at times, which, you know, it's not anything to be scared of. Same thing in Elden Ring. So I ended up obviously enjoying that a lot, but I think it's something that more casual players definitely need to be aware of. Talking about the story, I absolutely love the story of the game. I will say that there is a ending and then a true ending, and the true ending was insane. And what I find funny is I kind of stumbled into the true ending just because of experiences I had in the first Dragon's Dogma. So in New Game Plus, I went back and I did the other ending. And what's funny is like the vanilla ending, I guess we could call it, I didn't like nearly as much. I was kind of like, wow, that's it. I think if that was my first ending experience, I probably would have been disappointed. But having experienced the true ending and seeing how things go down and things in the world that change really enrich the experience. And that's actually something I'm really curious about with reviews, because I wonder how many people reviewing the game only get to the vanilla ending and then they're like, yeah, it was okay, not realizing that there's so much more to the game when you discover the true ending. And I know I'm sounding rather vague, and that's on purpose. I don't want to, you know, spoil anything here, but I will say that there is a true path in the game where achieving that is going to open up things in a big way. And I guess the best example I can give is, You know, when you're playing Sekiro, if you decide to side with Owl, that's it. You fight Ishin, game's over. If you decide to betray Owl, all of a sudden there's new zones that open up, and there's new fights that open up, and there's, you know, a whole extra chunk of the game. And we have a very similar approach here, where if you get one ending, you know, it's hunky-dory, everything's good. And if you discover the true ending, shit hits the fan, and it's a whole new game. So story, big A+. We don't see that a lot from devs. In fact, I think, you know, FromSoft is one of the only other devs I can think of that does that with games. But I'm a really big fan of that. In terms of the visuals, I think the world here looks absolutely beautiful, especially considering the amount of interactivity and the physics and the destructibility that happens in the world. I think they did just top notch here, you know, looking at the environment, especially the variety in the environment. You know, we have like wildflowers all over. We have the tall weeds, we have the bushes, we have the trees, we have the tall trees. There's a lot here to really enrich the environment and make it look varied. Which is something that I'm a big fan of. I think that's not done too often in games. I think we end up seeing, you know, the same grass palette, the same tree over and over. And they did a really good job of adding variability. Like, you know, we got like a skinny tree that's like kind of breaking apart over here. We have some richer fully trees over here. This one, we got a little bit breaking apart, but the top's still healthy. And I think that really makes the world just feel more alive. You know, when everything isn't uniform, I think that really adds to the overall experience. I will say in terms of visuals, because we have custom characters where we can create their proportions, there are some cutscenes that get a little bit goofy depending on how you make your character. Like the start of the game, my character's knee looked like it was popping out of a joint. And I had a scene in the brothel where it looked like my traps were going to eat my character because of how big they were. But, you know, I think that comes with the territory of making custom characters. So I can't really fault the devs for that. It's kind of, you know, if you make your character look a little goofy, you can expect some cutscenes to be a little bit goofy. In terms of audio design, I loved the audio design in the game, especially when we're fighting big stuff. We have the iconic, the dun 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 dun, the Dragon's Dogma, the song that kicks off during big fights. You have a lot of ambient music that plays. Sound effects, in particular weapon sound effects, are very good. For example, just listen to how beefy this thing sounds as I swing it. Just sounds heavy, right? I like that. I like a heavy sounding two-hander. But by the same, if I switch to something like this, very swift sounding. So I think they just did a great job on sound effects, environmental sounds. The one area that I would have liked to see improved would be more pawn voices. So there are essentially 8 pawn voices, and each of those voices has 5 different tonalities. So from like high to deep. I would have liked to have a couple more, only because after a while you start hearing the same pawns over and over. You know, there's like Liliana, I love her voice. Even though my official pawn isn't like out yet, I already don't like his voice because I found pawns that have the same voice as him, and it's very, I want to say almost whiny. He's like, Arisen, you should follow me. And I'm like, oh God, I got to change that voice now. It's the first thing I had to do at launch is change his voice. But overall, I thought audio was phenomenal in the game. Like I said, very, very minor complaints here. It's, you know, I want more voices for my characters. Whoa, 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 whoa. Ooh. All right. So with all that out of the way, the game isn't flawless. I will say my one and probably my biggest concern with the game is going to be performance. Now, obviously, I am playing on a 4090. My PC is an absolute monster of a rig. And with DLSS on, I average between 60 and 90 FPS. And that's with every setting maxed. Now, when I first started playing the game without DLSS, the 4090 was barely keeping up at 30 frames. Now, given we don't have the drivers for the game yet, and I'm sure, you know I don't have the day one patch, so I know there's still more optimization coming. initially that gave me some very heavy concerns about performance. And as time went on, playing with DLSS and quality, I didn't have any big performance issues. But given I have the type of PC that typically just brute forces stuff, and so I don't know how well this is going to work on lower end rigs with settings turned down, but that would be my one major concern with the game. And, you know, it's always something that I think is worth mentioning in reviews, even if it gets patched up. Like right now, the game is running fine. It looks great. But like I said, I am playing on a monster PC. And I'll be really curious to see what reviews look like for like medium or low end rigs, because if they don't patch stuff up, I'd imagine it could be rough. And it would be a damn shame, because, you know, you have what I think is an easy choice for game of the year, if not incredibly strong contender. And if it ends up not really getting its time to shine because of performance issues, that would be an incredible shame. Besides that, there are a couple areas that I think could have been improved. I don't think these are necessarily negatives, but for example, running around in the overworld here, you do use stamina when sprinting. This is like your default movement speed, which definitely isn't slow, but if you're sprinting, you're going to blow through your stamina very fast. And you don't use stamina in town, but I kind of wish we could just full on sprint while we're exploring the world. We also have, if I go to history and adventure book and enemies, if I go over here, I have a full log of all the enemies I fought, but it's just a list. I've killed this many goblins, this many wolves, and I feel like this definitely could have been expanded upon. If we go to NPCs, or if we go, where are they at? NPCs, where's it at? Oh, we have this NPC logbook. It says, you know, their gender, their race, their residence, what they like. I would have really liked to see something like that here, like show me a picture of a goblin, show me what they're weak to, what they're resistance to, and what locales they're typically found in. Because, you know, a big part of late game is hunting down enemies for their parts. And I've been looking for a Gore Chimera for about 10 hours, and I have one in my log. So I know I have found one before and killed it, but I don't know where the hell the thing is at. So definitely an area that could have been improved. In terms of the pawns, the pawn AI is significantly better. I would have liked even more dialogue for them after a while, you know, and I think this is the case of any game where you're going to have NPC companions, but some of the dialogue choices end up starting to get kind of samey. A couple of them I still enjoy, but like occasionally I'll get a pawn that's like, must you sprint everywhere, Arisen? And then Liliana has to tell them off, like, you know, we follow the pawn, not the other way around, shut up and get over it. But I would have liked even more pawn dialogue, especially because, you know, that's such a huge part of this game. But I will say in general, pawn AI is significantly better than it was in the first game. It is a night and day difference between the first game and now in terms of how adept the pawns are. So to wrap things up, performance concerns aside, right now this is my choice for game of the year. There is an incredibly deep RPG here with combat that is absolutely top-notch, a world that is an absolute delight to explore, and enough activities to keep you busy for an easy 100 hours in terms of getting your money worth. In terms of a typical playthrough, if you're just trying to get through the story and do a little bit of side quests here and there, you can probably knock it out in 20 to 30 hours. But if you want to explore the world and do all the dungeons and fight all the things, you're looking at a easy potential 50 to 100 hours, depending on how in-depth you're going to be. I know I'm already planning on starting over on stream and doing everything, and it's rare that I will play a game this in-depth and then still be looking forward to a subsequent playthrough. And I think that really speaks to what they've gone ahead and crafted here. You know, when I think of the original Dragon's Dogma, I think it was mostly known as kind of a cult hit. I don't think it really got the popularity that other RPGs did at the time. And I think people are going to be blown away by this. You know, this, like I said, this has been just an absolute phenomenal journey for me. And the last time I had adventure vibes like this was Elden Ring. So I'm going to close things out on that note. We will have a Let's Play at 2 episodes per day. I also plan on streaming the game in entirety. I'm going to be doing a Thief into Ranger playthrough for my next character, which should be a lot of fun. But either way, that is going to wrap things up here for now. So thanks for coming on by, checking it out. Let me know if y'all are looking forward to Dragon's Dogma 2 down in the comments below, and I'll catch you next time.